What makes a real soldier? Is it the rifle he carries? The uniform on his back? The training he's endured? The battles he's survived? Is it the way he moves? Disciplined and precise? Or the way he salutes? Sharp, steady, proud? Maybe you've seen him marching. Maybe you've seen her standing still, stone-faced, as the flag is folded over a fallen comrade's coffin. And maybe in moments like those, you've asked yourself, what really defines this person? Is it war? Is it strength? Is it obedience? Or is it something more? Number. A soldier is not defined by the weapon in his hands, or the medals on his chest, not by the drills he's mastered, or the enemies he's faced. Those things are visible, measurable, impressive to the world, but they are not what makes him who he is. A real soldier is defined by what he refuses to let go of, even when everything else is stripped away. He's defined by his unwavering sense of duty, by a code of honor that doesn't bend under pressure, by loyalty to something far greater than himself. He's defined by sacrifice, not just in battle, but in choosing to stand when it would be easier to walk away. By courage, not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward despite it. And above all, he's defined by 3 words. Words that don't just belong to him, but live through him. Duty, honor, country. 3 words. Just 3. But enough to hold a man together. When bullets tear through the air, when comrades fall, when fear claws at his chest, and doubt whispers louder than orders. Duty, honor, country. These aren't just words etched into military creeds. They are promises, principles, anchors in the storm. Duty to act, even when it's inconvenient. Honor to choose what is right, even when no one is watching. Country to protect something you may never see the end of. For people you may never meet. In the chaos of war, in the silence of sacrifice, in the loneliness of moral decisions. These 3 words remain. They don't ask for perfection, only commitment. They don't guarantee survival, only purpose. And for the soldier who breathes them, lives them, bleeds for them, they become more than a code. They become identity, duty, honor, country. To some, they might sound like just words, printed on plaques, sewn onto uniforms, spoken during ceremonies. But to those who've worn the uniform with heart, those 3 words are more than a motto. They are a way of life, a compass in chaos, a reason to stand when everything else says sit down. They've been whispered through gritted teeth in the middle of firefights, etched into dog tags, carried into the unknown, carried in letters home, folded flags, and final goodbyes. They are words passed from one soldier to the next, not in instruction manuals, but in the way one man covers another in a hail of bullets, in the way a leader says, "Go, I'll stay behind." These words are tradition, not because they're old, but because they've endured through war, through peace, through loss, through legacy. They're not shouted, they're lived. Out of all the words spoken about soldiers, none have captured their soul more clearly than these. Duty, honor, country. Those are the words that define a soldier. Simple, clear, unshakable. Not a description of what a soldier does, but of who a soldier is. It doesn't mention rank. It doesn't mention victories. It doesn't speak of strength, speed, or skill, because those things change. But what doesn't change? What lasts through every battle, every mission, every farewell, are these 3 truths: duty, honor, country. If you understand those words, you understand the heart of a soldier. These aren't just values printed in handbooks. They are the last words whispered before stepping into the unknown. The anchor a soldier holds onto when fear threatens to pull him under. Duty, honor, country. They've helped soldiers stand when their legs were trembling, move forward when everything in them screamed to run, make impossible choices. In moments where there was no easy way out, these 3 words have steadied trembling hands. As they carried fallen friends, they've silenced doubt when the cost of courage seemed too high, and they've given meaning to lives offered up on the altar of something greater. Because in the fog of war, when bullets fly and orders blur, when the line between right and wrong feels razor thin, these words remain clear. They are the line. They are the light. They are the reason so many have kept going, when there was every reason to stop. And now, it's time we understand them, not just as slogans, but as lessons worth living by. These 3 words, duty, honor, country, are not just ideals for soldiers. They are building blocks of character, foundations for any life lived with purpose, courage, and integrity. You don't have to be in uniform to understand them. You just have to be willing to look deeper, to see not what they demand from others, but what they call forth from you. So let's begin where it all starts, with duty. Life lesson analysis. 1. Duty. The call that needs no witness. Duty isn't loud. It doesn't beg for praise. It doesn't ask for recognition. Duty is that quiet voice that wakes you at dawn. Not because you want to rise, but because someone, somewhere, is counting on you to show up. It's the decision to do what's right when no one is watching, when no one will ever say thank you, when doing nothing would be easier, but your conscience won't let you. For a soldier, duty is more than responsibility. It's a vow to guard the post even in the pouring rain, to carry the weight when your body is broken, to follow through on the mission, even if you never make it home. But duty doesn't belong only on the battlefield. It belongs to the mother, who works 3 jobs to put food on the table, to the son who stays behind to care for his aging father, to the teacher who believes in every child, even the ones the world gave up on. Duty is not about being forced. It's about choosing, again and again, to put yourself second for something or someone that matters more. It is the discipline to stay when others walk away. It is the will to act when fear tempts you into silence. And though it rarely earns a spotlight, it is the root of every act of greatness. Because without duty, there is no honor, no country, no courage, only self. And the soldier knows there is no strength in living only for yourself. 2. Honor. What you keep when everything else is lost. Honor is not a trophy. It's not something you win. It's something you live. It's what remains when there's nothing left to prove, only something left to protect. Honor is the choice to tell the truth, even when a lie would save your reputation. To keep a promise, even when no one would know if you broke it. To take responsibility, when blaming someone else would be easier. For the soldier, honor isn't found in medals. It's found in the moment. He stays behind to cover his brothers. In the moment, he lifts the wounded, instead of saving himself. In the moment, he says, I was there, and I did what I could. Honor is silent, but its silence is louder than any applause. It's in the letter never sent, because it would only bring pain. It's in the refusal to speak ill of those who once betrayed you. It's in the way you carry loss without bitterness and service without pride. Honor belongs to the father who never breaks his child's trust, To the leader who refuses shortcuts, to the stranger who returns what isn't his, and most of all, to the one who holds to his values. Not when they're convenient, but when they cost him something. You don't inherit honor. You don't earn it once and keep it forever. You choose it, daily, in little decisions no one will ever see. And in those choices, you define who you are. Long after the uniform comes off, long after the battle ends. Because when the dust settles, and all that's left is who you were, when no one else stood beside you, honor is the only thing that will still be yours. 3. Country. More than a flag, more than a place. Country is not just soil beneath your feet. It's not just borders on a map. It's not just the anthem or the flag. Country is the feeling you carry when you see your mother's handwriting, when you hear your grandfather's stories, when you look into the eyes of a stranger and know, without a word, that you would protect them simply because they are yours. For the soldier, country is not just a duty. It's a love story. Not blind love, but the kind that sees all the flaws and still chooses to stand. It's what keeps him moving. When the terrain gets brutal, it's what he thinks of in the stillness before the fight. Not glory, not victory, but home. Country is the playground you grew up on. The smell of your neighbor's cooking. The streetlights that stayed on when nothing else made sense. It's the freedom to disagree, to dream, to build something better for the next generation. It's the teacher who believed in you, the nurse who held your hand, the firefighter who ran toward the flame, the immigrant who left everything to give their child a chance. And yes, it is the soldier who puts on the uniform, not out of hate for what's in front of him, but out of love for what's behind him. Country is not about being perfect. It's about being worth fighting for. And when a man chooses to give his life, not for power, not for gain, but for that quiet, persistent belief that his people deserve peace, that's when country becomes more than a word. It becomes a reason to live, and if needed, a reason to die. For duty, honor, country, a code to live by. When a man lives with duty, he shows up not because he's asked, but because he knows he's needed. When he lives with honor, he keeps his word even when it costs him. He holds his ground even when no one's watching. He stands alone if that's what it takes to stay true. And when he lives for country, he gives himself not to a place, but to a people, to a history, to a future he may never see, but believes is worth protecting. These 3 words, they're more than values. They're the spine of a man who refuses to bend. They're the fire that keeps him moving through pain. They're the reason he sleeps lightly, loves fiercely, and carries his scars with quiet pride. A man who lives with duty, honor, country, is more than a soldier. He's a guardian, a servant, a light in the darkest places. And when history forgets his name, as it often does, his actions will still echo. Because in living this way, he becomes more than flesh and bone. He becomes a symbol of resilience, of integrity, of what it truly means to be unshakably human in a world that begs us to forget duty, honor, country. Let that be how we live. Let that be what defines us. Sometimes words are just words, until someone comes along and lives them with such conviction that they become real. We can talk about duty, honor, country all day long, but nothing brings them to life like the story of someone who chose to live them when everything was at stake. Let me tell you about one of those people. Not a legend, Not a character from a movie, but a man in uniform, flesh and blood, fear and courage, who stood at the edge of death and chose duty anyway. This is the story of Captain William Swenson. 1. Introducing Captain William Swenson. In September of 2009, deep in the treacherous terrain of the Ganjgal Valley in Afghanistan, a small US military team found themselves trapped in an ambush. The air was thick with gunfire. The radio calls for help were going unanswered. Enemy fighters had the high ground, and the unit was surrounded. One of the men on the ground that day was Captain William Swenson, a soft-spoken officer, not known for theatrics, but for quiet leadership and an unbreakable sense of responsibility. He wasn't the highest-ranking soldier. He didn't have the most men under his command. But in that moment, as chaos erupted around him and death closed in on his team, he made a decision. He would not leave his men behind. Not now. Not ever. 2. The choice between life and death. The ambush was brutal. The team was pinned down from all sides. Mortars rained down. Bullets tore through trees and metal alike. And every second that passed meant more lives slipping away. Most would have called for air support and stayed under cover. It would have been the tactical move, the safe move. But Captain William Swenson didn't think that way. He looked around and saw his fellow soldiers, bleeding, screaming, calling for help through static-filled radios. He saw Afghan allies falling, American brothers fighting just to stay alive. And so he made the only decision his heart would allow. He ran into the fire, not once, but again, and again, and again. Each time, he charged into the kill zone, dragging the wounded out with his bare hands, carrying them across open terrain, exposing himself to enemy fire, just to bring one more soul back to safety. At one point, with a helicopter finally on sight, Swenson was captured on video, placing a fellow soldier's lifeless body onto the medevac. Before turning away, he paused, leaned forward, and kissed the man's forehead. A final act of honor, of grief, of unspoken brotherhood, in the middle of hell. And then, he went back in, because someone else was still out there. He refused to stop, until every man was accounted for, alive or fallen. And when asked later why he risked everything, why he disobeyed standard protocol, why he went back into the line of fire, over and over again, his answer was quiet, clear, and unforgettable. 3. The reason why. In the aftermath of the ambush, after the rescue was over, after the dead were honored, and the living returned with scars no one could see, people began to ask questions. Why did he go back? Why would one man risk everything? His life, his future, his family, for men already presumed lost? Why leave cover? Again and again, when the odds said he wouldn't make it back? Why disobey the logic of survival? To obey the call of something deeper? William Swenson didn't give a speech. He didn't frame his answer in drama or heroism. He simply said, "It was my duty. That's it. No glory. No bravado. Just a soldier, standing in the quiet aftermath of violence, reaffirming the code he had lived by all along. Duty, not as a slogan, but as a heartbeat, a compass, a line in the sand between who he was and who he refused to become." That answer silenced the room and echoed far beyond it, because in those 4 words, Swenson reminded us all, real courage doesn't shout. It simply shows up again and again, until the last man is safe. 4. The aftermath and the legacy. William Swenson made it out alive, but he never walked the same. Not because his body was broken, but because his heart now carried the weight of those who didn't make it home. He returned with the silence of war still echoing in his eyes, with the names of fallen brothers etched into every breath, with a grief he rarely spoke of, but never stopped honoring. And yet, from that grief, something powerful was born. His story began to spread, not as a tale of victory, but of character, of one man's refusal to abandon his people, of one man who made duty more than a word, who made honor a verb, who made country not just a place, but a promise. Young recruits read his name in training halls. Veterans whispered it in quiet moments of remembrance. Parents taught it to their children, as proof that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks, quietly, back into the fire. In 2013, William Swenson was awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. But even then, he said the medal did not belong to him alone. It belonged to the ones he fought beside, to the ones who didn't come home, to the truth that he carried in his bones. Duty, honor, country. He didn't ask for glory. He lived for meaning. And in doing so, he became the very definition of a soldier. Not in words, but in legacy. A reminder of the soldier's spirit. Every soldier, before they ever see battle, before they ever hear the crack of gunfire or feel the weight of loss, is taught something simple, but unforgettable. Live in a way that when you come home, you can look in the mirror and be proud. That's it. No speeches, no heroic declarations, just a quiet command to live with integrity, to serve with heart, to return not just alive, but true. Because war doesn't just test your strength, it tests your soul. And when the uniform is folded, when the crowd is gone, when no one's watching anymore, all that remains is the man in the mirror. Did you do what was right? Did you honor your word? Did you carry your brothers, even when you were breaking? That's the weight a soldier carries. Not just bullets, but memory, but legacy, but the sacred oath to return as someone his country can be proud of, and that he can be proud of too. That is the quiet spirit that moves behind every salute, every tear at a funeral, every moment of stillness before dawn. The spirit built not on victory, but on virtue. You don't need a uniform to live like a soldier. You don't need to wear a uniform to live with duty. You don't need to go to war to understand honor. You don't need to carry a flag to love your country, because some of the greatest warriors never set foot on a battlefield. They're the parents who stay up through the night so their children can sleep in peace. The nurses who carry grief home in silence after losing a patient they fought to save. The teachers who show up even on their worst days because one student still believes in them. They're the friends who keep your secrets and show up when you're falling apart. The neighbors who shovel your driveway without being asked. The people who speak the truth, even when it costs them something. Duty, honor, country. These aren't military words. They are human values. They belong to anyone who chooses responsibility over convenience, integrity over popularity, and belonging over selfishness. So no, you don't need to fight in a war to be a soldier. You just need to live for something bigger than yourself. A final call to live with purpose. So here's what I hope you remember. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be faithful to something bigger than yourself. Because when you live with duty, you become someone others can count on. When you live with honor, you become someone even silence can't corrupt. And when you live for country, not just for the land, but for the people who fill it, you become a part of something eternal. You become a soldier, not of war, but of meaning, of purpose, of quiet, unshakable strength. And in a world that often forgets what matters, you become the one who remembers. So stand tall, love fiercely, hold the line even when no one else will. Because this life, this brief, beautiful life, is worth showing up for, with courage, with conviction, with a heart that still believes in what is right. You may never go to battle, but if you live with duty, carry yourself with honor, and never forget where you belong, then you too are a soldier on the battlefield of life. If you've ever woken up, not for yourself, but for someone who needed you, if you've ever stood firm when walking away would have been easier, if you've ever chosen the harder right over the easier wrong, not for praise, but because your heart couldn't do otherwise, then you already know what it means to live like a soldier. Not because of the battles you've fought, but because of the battles you chose not to walk away from. So if any part of this story spoke to you, if you saw even a glimpse of your own courage reflected in these words, then I invite you to leave a huge in the comments. Not as a symbol of war, but as a symbol of loyalty, of strength, of quiet everyday honor. And if you'd like to walk this road with me, to hear more stories of duty, of sacrifice, of meaning, then you're always welcome here. Because this world needs more than content. It needs reminders of who we are when we choose to live with purpose. I'll be here with the next story, the next name, the next flame that refuses to go out. Until then, live with duty, stand with honor, and never forget where you belong.